Jenna Harwood always knew how to disappear. Not physically. No, she was punctual to family dinners, always the one setting the table while her younger sister Haley twirled in late with a dramatic entrance and a new story. Jenna was there when her father had his surgery and needed someone to drive him home. She stayed up late helping her mother organize receipts for tax season. She even covered for Haley's botched college application deadline by typing the whole thing herself in a single night. She was present, but somehow always invisible. It started early. At age 7, Jenna was praised for being independent, a word her parents used when they forgot to pack her lunch or attend her school recitals. "You've always been the easy one," her mother, Barbara, would say, as if it were a compliment. Her father, Martin, would ruffle her hair and add, "Haley just needs more help, sweetie. You've got it all under control." Haley, 3 years younger, cried when she didn't get what she wanted. Jenna? She'd learned to fold her disappointments into neat little origami and bury them in her journal. By the time she turned 18, Jenna had earned a partial scholarship to a competitive business program. Her parents, celebrating Haley's acceptance into a much less demanding university, hosted a party. There was a banner, "Congratulations, Haley," and cupcakes with her college mascot. When Jenna asked about her own milestone, Barbara blinked. "Oh, honey, we didn't think you'd want to fuss. You're not the type." Jenna went to college quietly, worked 2 jobs, and graduated with honors. Meanwhile, Haley changed majors 4 times, racked up debt, and still managed to get her tuition covered, just until she finds her passion, their father said. When Jenna returned home after graduation, she took an entry-level position at Harwood and Langston, the construction supply firm co-owned by her father. She didn't ask for special treatment, and none was given. She worked harder than anyone else in the admin department, often staying past hours and offering ideas that were politely ignored. Then came the job opening. The company's operations manager retired suddenly. Jenna had spent 4 years mastering every internal system, and several of her colleagues encouraged her to apply. For once, she felt ready to step into something more. She prepared a presentation, she practiced interviews, she even updated her wardrobe. But the morning before the interviews, Barbara called her into the family kitchen. Haley was there, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Future Boss Babe." "Sweetheart," Barbara began, "we need to talk about the position." Jenna's stomach dropped. "Haley's going to apply," Martin added from the doorway, "and we think it's best you step back, just this time." "Step back?" Jenna said quietly. "I've been working there for 4 years." "We know," Barbara said gently. "But Haley's been struggling. She needs this more than you. You've always been the strong one. You'll find another opportunity. But she doesn't even know how our systems work. She's never worked in operations." "Exactly," Haley interrupted. "That's why it's a great learning opportunity." Jenna stared at them, heart pounding. "You're giving her a job she's not qualified for and asking me to step aside?" "Just for now," Barbara said. "Be the bigger person. You always are. Be the bigger person." It wasn't the first time she'd heard that phrase. It was always Jenna's burden to carry. The peacekeeper, the fixer, the backup. She didn't argue, she didn't scream. She went back to work the next day, said nothing, and congratulated Haley when she was announced as the new operations manager. Haley beamed like she'd just been crowned queen. She even thanked Jenna for being so mature about it. 3 months later, Jenna watched as Haley forgot to submit an important vendor order, delaying a project and costing the company thousands. When Jenna brought it up to Martin, he said, "Your sister's under pressure. Be supportive." Supportive, like a silent foundation no one ever notices until it cracks. It all came to a head the day Jenna received a call from the family lawyer's assistant, asking her to confirm an appointment about estate updates. Curious, she arrived at the office expecting something standard. What she heard instead made her skin go cold. Martin and Barbara had recently updated their estate plan. Everything, assets, investments, the house Jenna grew up in, was set to pass to Haley. Not split, not partial, all of it. Stunned, Jenna looked across the polished table. "Why?" she asked, voice trembling. Barbara exchanged a look with Martin. "You don't need it, honey. You have a good job, no kids, and you're so financially responsible. Haley's the one who needs support. She's trying so hard." Jenna swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're giving her everything. You'll understand when you have your own children," Martin said kindly. "Some need more than others." That night, Jenna sat in her apartment, lights off, the estate documents crumpled in her hands. She wasn't angry, she was devastated. All these years she'd been told she was the strong one, the stable one. But it had never been love. It had been convenience. She wasn't their priority. She was their backup plan. She looked around her sparse apartment. Nothing here was given. It was all earned. The student loan payments, the side hustles, the unpaid overtime. Every inch of progress had been carved out with her own 2 hands. And now her parents had confirmed the truth she had feared for years. She didn't matter unless someone else needed her. Later that month, an invitation arrived in the mail. Haley was getting married. Jenna's name wasn't printed as a guest. It was handwritten at the bottom in her mother's cursive. "We'd love if you could help set up the tables. You're so good at organizing things." That was the moment something inside Jenna snapped. She would go to the wedding, but not as the invisible daughter. She had nothing left to lose, and everything to take back. The sun beat down hard on the vineyard that morning, too bright for Jenna's mood as she pulled into the back parking lot. The same lot designated for staff, service vendors, and non-essential guests, according to the venue map Barbara had emailed her the night before. "So you don't get caught up in all the chaos," the note had said cheerfully. Jenna read between the lines. "Enter quietly, don't be seen." She looked down at herself. Black slacks, a plain navy tee, flats. She wasn't even allowed to be a guest at her own sister's wedding, let alone family. Her reflection in the side mirror looked tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from years of being overlooked, overused, and underappreciated. A clipboard-wielding woman with a headset approached as soon as Jenna entered the side doors. "Jenna Harwood?" she asked without looking up. "Great. Barbara said you'd be helping with setup. Linens are in the back. Start with the tables near the dance floor. And oh, please keep your hair tied up. We're doing photos soon." "Photos?" Jenna nearly laughed. She wasn't even in them. She walked silently into the large reception hall, still half-finished, floral arrangements in buckets, half-covered chairs, boxes of name cards scattered across long tables. It was a beautiful venue. Haley had chosen well. Vines twisted around open beams, soft cream-colored drapes framed the windows, and string lights sparkled faintly, even in daylight. It was elegant, curated, expensive. Everything Haley was always allowed to have. Jenna rolled up her sleeves and got to work, as always. She spent the next 2 hours folding napkins into fans, setting wine glasses, checking name cards, though her name was conspicuously absent from any table. She wasn't surprised. She'd expected it. Still, the hollow ache in her chest grew heavier. Around noon, the bridesmaids filtered in, laughing and clinking glasses of champagne. All of them wore matching silk robes in a shade Haley called powder blush. Haley walked in last, her makeup flawless, her hair styled in cascading waves, already glowing with anticipation and adoration. When Haley spotted Jenna, her smile flickered, but only for a second. She tilted her head, walked over, and said, "Thanks for helping, Jen. You've always been really good at these things." "These things?" Jenna asked, wiping her hands on a napkin. "Organizing, being reliable, handling the chaos. I mean, I could never." Haley giggled and sipped her drink. "Anyway, can you make sure the welcome table is stocked with programs? Mom said the first box was misprinted, so we're only using the second shipment." Without waiting for a reply, she twirled away to pose for another photo. Jenna stared after her, something bitter rising in her throat. A wedding planner handed her another box of printed programs. "You're the sister, right? Can you double-check the names?" The brides worried a few were spelled wrong. Jenna opened one of the programs. Sure enough, under bridal party, it listed maid of honor, Haley's childhood best friend, Rachel, followed by the bridesmaids. No mention of Jenna, not even under family. She clenched the paper in her fist. She couldn't do this. Not again. Not today. She stepped outside into the warm sun and took a deep breath. Behind the venue, she found a quiet spot near a row of trees. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm brewing inside her. But just then, voices carried through the open window near the bridal suite. "Barbara and Haley. I'm just saying," Haley's voice rang out, sharper than usual. "Jenna knows her role. She's not the star. She never was. But she's useful." Barbara chuckled. "Of course, darling. You're the one with presence." "Jenna, she's reliable. But let's be honest, she was never meant to shine. We both know Jenna was never meant to shine, but at least she knows her place." Jenna froze. "She's always been dependable. Some people are just background characters. It was one thing to feel invisible. It was another to hear your family confirm it with such casual cruelty." Jenna backed away, her pulse in her ears. Her mother, who had leaned on her for everything. Her sister, who had taken everything handed to her and acted like she earned it. They didn't just overlook Jenna, they designed her erasure. She walked back to the main hall, no longer seeing the elegance, the flowers, the guests arriving in designer clothes. All she could hear was that line. She knows her place. She ripped off the staff badge they'd handed her and tossed it onto a table. She grabbed her bag and walked out the side door without a word. Not to Barbara, not to Haley, not even to the wedding planner frantically waving a clipboard. She didn't look back. She drove home with her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. And for the first time in her life, Jenna Harwood didn't cry. She planned. That night, in her small apartment above the bakery she frequented every Sunday, Jenna sat cross-legged on the floor with her old notebooks spread out around her. Financial literacy modules, budgeting workshops, startup models, curriculum ideas, scribbled ideas she'd once been too timid to speak aloud, things she'd always shelved to make room for other people's needs, not anymore. There, in the dim yellow light of her desk lamp, Jenna opened her laptop and began drafting an email. Subject: remember our conversation. To Mrs. Evelyn Ellington. Hi Evelyn, I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out because I'm finally ready to build what we talked about years ago. I have the concept and I know how to make it work. If you're willing, I'd love to meet. Warmly, Jenna Harwood. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. 32 minutes later, a reply appeared. From Evelyn Ellington. Subject: let's build it, Jenna. I've been waiting for this email. Come to Chicago. I have a space. Monday at 10. Don't waste another day. Jenna leaned back in her chair, heart thudding. She was leaving. Not just the wedding, not just the weekend. She was leaving the family that had used her like a footnote, the role they'd assigned her since birth, the weight of being the strong one so they could be selfish. She didn't know exactly what was ahead, but she knew what she was leaving behind, and she wasn't coming back empty-handed. The first thing Jenna noticed about Evelyn Ellington's office in downtown Chicago was that it felt nothing like a boardroom. There were no cold glass tables, no high-backed leather chairs. Instead, there were exposed brick walls, bookshelves overflowing with titles on strategy and leadership, and a chalkboard wall covered in formulas, arrows, and quotes written in colorful script. One in particular stood out. When they underestimate you, don't correct them. Just win. Evelyn stood near the window, her white curls tucked into a loose bun, a tablet in her hand and a coffee in the other. You look different, she said, smiling as Jenna walked in. Different how? Jenna asked cautiously. Like someone who finally stopped waiting for permission. That morning marked the beginning of Jenna's second life, the one where she didn't ask to be seen, she made herself impossible to ignore. Evelyn wasn't just a mentor, she was a gatekeeper, a former COO of a global tech firm who'd left the corporate grind to build a women-led business incubator. Over the next 3 months, she ripped Jenna's idea apart, then helped her rebuild it into something sharp, scalable, and investor-ready. Jenna called her platform Ledger, not just because it dealt with money, but because it was her way of writing down what had been erased. A tool for women like her, forgotten daughters, overlooked wives, underappreciated professionals who needed to reclaim control of their financial lives. The premise was simple: teach financial literacy through gamified modules, real-life simulations, and mentorship pairing. Start with budgeting, grow to investing. But the mission was deeper: give women the language of power their families, schools, and society had failed to teach them. By the end of the first quarter, she had a working prototype. By the second, she had over 500 beta users. By the third, Evelyn introduced her to Carmine Allen, a venture capitalist known for backing purpose-driven tech. The meeting was nerve-wracking. Jenna wore her best blazer, held her hands together to stop the shaking, and pitched Ledger with every fiber of her truth. When she finished, Carmine leaned back and said, "You're the quiet kind of dangerous, aren't you?" Jenna blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You don't shout. You don't posture. You just know exactly what you're doing, and you're doing it well." I like that. Ledger got its first round of funding that week, $200,000 in seed money to build out the team and grow the platform. Jenna didn't celebrate with champagne or a party. She went home, lit a candle, and took out the letter her parents had mailed her months earlier, the one containing the updated estate plan. She burned it. The next year passed in a blur of growth. Ledger exploded across social media, thanks to viral testimonials from women who had climbed out of debt, left toxic relationships, and started their own businesses after learning how to manage money. Jenna was invited to speak on panels, podcasts, and eventually gave a TEDx talk titled "Power is Learned, Not Given," but she still never told her family what she was building, until they came knocking. It was a Thursday afternoon when she received the call. Barbara. Jenna stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Hi. Oh, honey. Barbara's voice trembled. We've had a bit of a situation. Can you come home? Jenna hesitated. What kind of situation? There was a pause. Your father's been diagnosed. It's his kidneys. He needs surgery. And, well, the company's in trouble. Jenna said nothing. Barbara continued. We thought we'd have time to sort things out, but Haley made some decisions. Poor ones. We've lost 2 contracts. The board's pressuring us. We need help. We need you. It was surreal. For years, she had been the one making desperate phone calls, asking for time, asking for acknowledgement. And now, here was her mother, reaching out because the golden child had dropped the crown. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jenna said flatly. Barbara sighed. We need someone to stabilize the operations, someone the team respects. I know we haven't always appreciated you the way we should have, but you know the business better than anyone. Your father's legacy is at risk. Haley can't handle it alone. Jenna let the silence stretch long enough to be uncomfortable. Let me be clear, she said finally. If I come back, I'm not coming as a favor. I want majority control, 51%. Barbara gasped. Jenna, that's unreasonable. We can't give you... You can, Jenna interrupted. You just don't want to, but you need me more than I need you, and I'm done being your backup plan. Either I come back with authority, or I don't come back at all. Barbara didn't answer right away. Then quietly, let me speak to your father. The next day, Jenna received an email, an official offer letter signed by Martin Harwood, transferring 51% of voting shares to her in exchange for a commitment to restructure the company over the next year. She flew home that weekend, not as a daughter, as the boss. The office hadn't changed much. Same gray carpets, same water-stained ceiling tiles, same framed photo of Martin shaking hands with the mayor 20 years ago. But something had changed in Jenna. She walked in with her own team, a financial advisor, a corporate attorney, and her COO from Ledger, Nina, a former classmate turned friend, sharp as glass and twice as lethal. Within days, Jenna began an audit of Harwood and Langston's books. What she found was worse than mismanagement. It was outright fraud. Haley had funneled company funds into personal accounts labeled as vendor relations. The numbers didn't lie. She'd paid for spa retreats, luxury bags, and even a pre-wedding vacation to Italy under the guise of market research. Barbara had signed off on half of it. When Jenna confronted them in the boardroom, they didn't even look ashamed. We had to keep up appearances, Haley said defensively. The clients expect a certain lifestyle. You wouldn't understand. You've never had to represent the brand like I do. Jenna didn't blink. You mean lie, and steal, and compromise the company's integrity so you could play executive Barbie? Haley's face flushed. Don't talk to me like that. You're only here because we let you in. Jenna leaned forward, voice steady. No, I'm here because you failed. I'm here because you thought I was too weak to win. And now I'm not just in, I'm in charge. Barbara stood, panicked. We can fix this privately. Don't go public. It'll ruin the company. I already hired an external auditing firm, Jenna said. They arrive Monday. Haley's voice cracked. You would destroy your own family? No, Jenna replied coldly. You did that a long time ago. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Jenna didn't sleep the night after the confrontation. She didn't need to. Her mind was clear, sharper than it had been in years. She stood in the master conference room of Harwood and Langston the next morning as the audit team filed in. Sharp suits, folders in hand, and expressions that said no more cover-ups. Jenna introduced them herself, shaking hands with each one. She wasn't just there to observe, she was there to uncover. Word traveled fast through the company. Whispers spread like wildfire. Jenna Harwood is back, and she's not taking prisoners. Some employees greeted her with cautious optimism. Others, especially those who'd played favorites with Haley and Barbara, looked visibly nervous. Jenna didn't care either way. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to save what should have been hers all along. The next week unfolded like a corporate drama unraveling in real time. Haley tried to rally support, hosting impromptu meetings, sending frantic company-wide emails with subject lines like, "We are a family, let's stay united." But no one bought it. When the auditors revealed the extent of her misappropriations, over $140,000 in undocumented personal expenses, her credibility collapsed like a house of cards. Jenna summoned Haley and Barbara to a formal disciplinary hearing with the board. They showed up together, both wearing black as if they were mourning something, and in a way, They were. Barbara started with tears. Jenna, we know you're angry. This isn't personal, Jenna said, her voice calm, icy. This is about the integrity of the company. Your actions aren't just unethical, they're illegal. Haley scoffed. Please. You think you're some savior now? You're just jealous that I was always better at this than you. Jenna raised an eyebrow. Better? You couldn't even manage a wedding budget without stealing from the company. I didn't steal. Then why are there spa receipts labeled as construction site visits? Silence. Jenna looked around the room. As acting CEO and with board majority, I'm officially removing both of you from your positions, effective immediately. You'll be allowed to retain your family shares, but you will no longer have decision-making power. Barbara gasped. You can't. I just did. The vote was swift, unanimous. Security escorted them out. Jenna didn't watch. She returned to her office, her actual office now, overlooking the city skyline, and stared at the framed photo of the original Harwood family. It used to hang in the hallway. She'd taken it down, not out of spite, out of closure. Martin was still in the hospital, recovering from surgery. He hadn't said much when she visited, only nodded slightly, too tired or too ashamed to speak. She left flowers and didn't stay long. Jenna didn't need his approval anymore. She had something better, control. Over the next 3 months, she restructured the company from the inside out. She cut unnecessary spending, brought in experienced talent, and established clear HR policies that prioritized merit and ethics over family connections. For the first time in decades, Harwood and Langston began showing a profit margin that didn't rely on favors and fluff. Jenna even launched a community outreach arm, partnering with local trade schools, offering internships to young women interested in construction management. She named the program the Ledger Project. It caught media attention. An article ran in Business Forward Weekly, From Forgotten to Fearless, how Jenna Harwood revived her family's business by starting over. Her phone didn't stop ringing for days, invitations, investment offers, interview requests, but one call stopped her in her tracks. It was from her childhood home, her parents' landline. She didn't answer. Later that evening, a voicemail came in from an unfamiliar number. Haley's voice, cracked and bitter. You think you've won? You haven't. You just embarrassed us, destroyed everything we built. And for what? So you could feel powerful? So you could punish us for not babysitting your ego when we had a whole family to raise? You were always second best, Jenna, always. And everyone knows it, no matter what title you put on your door. Jenna listened to the message once, then deleted it. A month later, the house went on the market. Her family's home, where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd buried her first pet, where she'd overheard her parents call her the reliable one like it was an insult, was being sold. The estate had run out of money, and with Martin's medical bills mounting, Barbara had no choice but to liquidate. Jenna saw the listing online. She stared at the photos, the cracked white porch railing, the faded blue shutters, the tree swing that still swayed, though no one had touched it in years. She bought it, full asking price, in cash. When the sale went through, Barbara left a voicemail, a short, almost whispered line, I never thought you'd want it. Jenna didn't reply. But she did visit the house, alone. She walked through each room, untouched since she left home. Her childhood bedroom still had the peeling, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The basement still smelled like must and old books. The attic held boxes of forgotten report cards and third-place science fair ribbons. She didn't cry. She smiled. Because this time she hadn't been given anything. She had taken back what was hers, not as revenge, as reclamation. The day Jenna officially changed the company letterhead to read Harwood Solutions, Inc., she felt something inside her shift. Not pride, not even triumph. It was a quiet, powerful peace. Like her bones had finally realigned after decades of being bent to fit into someone else's frame. She stood at the front of the town hall meeting for all 86 employees, most of whom had never heard her speak publicly before. She cleared her throat. Some of you remember me as the quiet girl who stayed late and organized supply closets, she said. A few chuckles broke out in the back. Some of you remember me as Haley's sister, or Martin's daughter. But today, I hope you remember me as someone who believes this company is worth saving, not because of its name, but because of the people who keep it running. She paused, letting her words land. I'm not here to run this place like a dynasty. I'm here to run it like a business, with transparency, with accountability, and with respect. If you're here to do the same, let's get to work. The room erupted in applause. Jenna wasn't expecting it. She certainly wasn't prepared for Nina to lean over and whisper, "You just got your first standing ovation." The weeks that followed were hard, relentless even. Jenna poured herself into the business. She sat with every department, restructured the entire operations pipeline, cut unnecessary managerial roles that had been created to give Haley's friends fake titles, and brought in fresh talent from outside. She also implemented anonymous reporting channels for harassment, bias, and misconduct, something the old regime had always avoided because family doesn't need HR. That phrase alone had become her private trigger. Family didn't need HR? No, family needed boundaries. Family needed consequences. Meanwhile, her personal life was quiet. She worked late, ate dinners at her desk, and declined most social invitations. Not out of bitterness, but because she was rebuilding her sense of identity. No more backup role, no more overfunctioning so others could underachieve. But one invitation did get through her armor, an email with the subject line, "You gave me my life back." It was from a woman named Carmen Diaz, a former Ledger user. Carmen had been a stay-at-home mom for 15 years, married to a man who controlled every dollar. Through Ledger, she learned how to track finances, build credit, and ultimately leave a toxic marriage. She now owned her own mobile hair salon and employed 3 women in her neighborhood. In her email, Carmen wrote, "I never thought someone like me could matter in a boardroom. You taught me otherwise. Ledger didn't just teach me how to budget, it taught me I had worth." Jenna read it 3 times, each word melting into the cracks of her soul like gold in broken pottery. She wrote back, "You were never broken. You just needed someone to hand you a mirror." A few months later, at the Women in Leadership Summit in Austin, Jenna gave a keynote speech titled "The Cost of Being the Strong One." It went viral, more than 2 million views in 72 hours. In the talk, she told a story she'd never shared publicly. "When my sister got married, I was invited, not as a guest, but as free labor. I was handed a clipboard and told to arrange chairs and refill restrooms. That morning, I overheard my own mother say I was meant to be background, that I knew my place. That was the moment I stopped waiting for love to look like validation. I stopped being the family's silent backbone and started building a spine of my own." The most dangerous thing you can give someone who's been overlooked is the chance to stand alone. Because when they do, they don't come back to fit into your box. They come back to burn it down and build something better. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Haley saw the clip on Instagram, reposted by a popular finance account. She sent Jenna a text for the first time in over a year. "Was that about me?" Jenna didn't reply. But she did screenshot it, save it in a folder labeled "Proof of Growth," and move on with her day. Then came the lawsuit. Barbara, now broke, bitter, and furious, filed a legal motion challenging the voting share transfer that had made Jenna majority owner. She claimed Jenna had manipulated Martin while he was unwell, that she had coerced the family during a vulnerable moment. Jenna was stunned, but not unprepared. Her legal team responded with documentation, signed contracts, email trails, and most damning of all, a video clip Martin himself had recorded while recovering in the hospital. In it, he said, "If anyone ever questions this transfer, let the record show. I gave Jenna control because she earned it. Not because she asked, but because she didn't. She never once demanded anything she hadn't worked for 10 times over." The court dismissed Barbara's claim with prejudice. The moment the ruling came in, Jenna stood in her office, staring out at the city she now called home. Chicago had become her sanctuary, far from the vineyard weddings and voicemail guilt trips, far from silk-robed sisters and whispered betrayals. She had gone from the background to the boardroom, from Plan B to Chapter 1. It was the first time they had all been in the same room since the wedding. The room was smaller than Jenna expected. The lawyer's conference suite had sleek marble floors, polished black chairs, and too many windows, the kind of place meant to intimidate. But Jenna felt nothing as she stepped inside, only a calm stillness that came from knowing the truth was already on her side. Barbara sat stiffly on the left, her once perfectly styled hair tied back into a severe bun. She wore dark blue, her mouth pursed in a line of silent disapproval. Haley sat next to her, legs crossed, jaw tight. She wore expensive sunglasses indoors and hadn't said a word since Jenna walked in. On Jenna's side of the table sat Nina and her attorney, a woman named Rita Goldman, sharp as a blade and with the courtroom winds to match. They didn't need to speak. Their presence said enough. Barbara broke the silence first. We didn't come here to fight. Jenna raised an eyebrow. You filed a lawsuit against me. I'm pretty sure that qualifies. Barbara exhaled, trying to find a softer tone. We were overwhelmed with your father's health, the business. Everything fell apart so quickly. No, Jenna said, leaning forward slightly. It didn't fall apart. You ran it into the ground because you thought it would always be yours. That no matter how many mistakes were made, someone would clean them up. Haley finally looked up. Her voice was cold. You think you're better than us now, just because you made a few smart investments and got lucky. Lucky? Jenna almost laughed. You think this is luck? You think working 2 jobs through college, building a startup from a couch, and surviving your constant sabotage is luck? You've always resented me, Haley said, her voice rising. You couldn't stand that I was the one people cared about. Jenna's voice dropped to a near whisper. People cared about you because I made it easy for them to ignore me, because I folded myself into silence so you could have center stage. And you used that stage to lie, to steal, to humiliate me. Barbara raised a hand, her voice desperate now. Can we not drag all of this back up? Please, we're still family. Stop, Jenna said sharply. You don't get to use that word as a shield. Family doesn't mean you get to betray me, then expect my help when the consequences finally catch up. Haley stood, slamming her hands on the table. You took everything. You kicked us out of the company, you humiliated us publicly, you even bought the damn house. Wasn't it enough to watch us fall? Did you have to stand on us while you climbed? Jenna stood too slowly. Her eyes never left Haley's. I didn't steal anything. I just took back what you said I didn't deserve. The room fell silent. Even Barbara looked down. Jenna continued, her voice shaking only slightly. You never apologized for what you said that day at the wedding, about me knowing my place. But here's the thing, I did know my place, and now I know it wasn't behind you, it wasn't under you, it wasn't on the sidelines, it's in front. Haley's lips parted like she wanted to reply, but nothing came out. Jenna turned to the mediator. I'm not settling. This suit is going nowhere, and we all know it. They came here hoping I'd back down. I won't. Dismiss it now, or we go to trial. And I promise you, there are more skeletons in their financial closet than you're prepared to handle. The mediator sighed. Mrs. Harwood. Ms. Harwood. Based on the evidence in Mr. Harwood's prior statements, we are recommending full dismissal, with prejudice. Barbara made a choked sound. Whether in disbelief or exhaustion, no one knew. Jenna gathered her folder calmly. As she left the room, she heard Haley mutter under her breath, You'll always be alone. Jenna paused in the doorway, then turned. Better alone than surrounded by people who only show up when they want something. And with that, she walked out. That night, Jenna didn't go back to her apartment. She went to the old Harwood house, her house now. She stood on the porch for a long time, remembering the Christmas mornings where she'd woken up first, only to sit alone while everyone else slept in. The teenage years when she helped her father balance books because Haley couldn't do math. The nights she stayed up editing Haley's college essays, only to watch her name disappear from any thanks or mention. All those memories were still here, but they didn't hurt the same way anymore. Because she wasn't chasing approval now, she was closing the chapter. She unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and for the first time since she bought the place, truly walked through it, not as a visitor, not as a ghost, but as the one who chose herself. Room by room, she packed away the old remnants, photo albums, dusty furniture, the broken lamp her mother had always promised to fix, but never did. She didn't throw them away, she just moved them out of the way. The next morning, she called a contractor. Hi, I'm looking to remodel, start fresh, new walls, new kitchen. Tear down the old dining room wall, it doesn't open the way I need it to anymore. The man on the phone chuckled. Sounds like you're about to make this place yours. Jenna smiled. I already did. The morning of the Ledger Women's Impact Summit, the air buzzed with anticipation. It had taken Jenna 3 years to build her vision from an idea into a movement. What started as an online platform had become a national force, a community of over 200,000 women reclaiming their independence through financial education, mentorship, and legal advocacy. They were small business owners, nurses, immigrants, teachers, grandmothers, divorcees, fresh college grads, each one fighting to own her future. Jenna stood backstage waiting for her cue. She wore a crisp white suit and a quiet confidence that no longer needed to shout to be heard. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the conference theme, From Overlooked to Unstoppable. When the host called her name, the crowd roared before she even reached the podium. She took a breath, adjusted the mic, and began. 3 years ago, I stood at my sister's wedding, not as a guest, but as free labor. My mother asked me to sweep bathrooms. I did it, quietly, because that's what I was taught. Be dependable, don't complain, stay useful. I didn't realize then that I was being trained to accept scraps. But something changed that day, not because they finally saw me, but because I saw myself. I stopped waiting for someone to pick me. I stopped asking to belong. I started building the life I deserved, even when no one clapped for me. And now I'm here, not because I was chosen, but because I chose myself. The standing ovation was long, loud, and tearful. Jenna had become more than a founder. She was a mirror, a permission slip. Proof that walking away from those who took you for granted was not selfish, it was survival. After the speech, Jenna stepped into the hallway for a breather. She didn't expect to see the man waiting near the exit, Martin. Her father stood awkwardly, thinner now, walking cane in hand. His eyes were older, sad, but no longer defensive. I watched your speech, he said quietly. You were incredible. Jenna crossed her arms. Why are you here? I had to see it for myself. What you built. What I never made space for. She didn't reply. Martin looked down. You were never our backup plan, Jenna. We just didn't know how to love someone who didn't need us. She let that hang in the air. I did need you, she said finally. I just stopped showing it because every time I did, you handed my needs to someone louder. He winced. I came to apologize, he said. I don't expect anything, I just needed to say it. She studied him, then nodded once. Thank you. He left without asking for money, without asking to come back. That was apology enough. Later that night, Jenna sat on the porch of her renovated home. The old shutters were gone. The porch railing had been replaced with warm cedar. The inside was modern, airy, filled with plants and light. Every room had been redesigned with intention. Nothing remained that she hadn't chosen. Nina joined her with 2 mugs of tea. You know what we should do? She said, grinning. Buy the old Harwood warehouse, turn it into a ledger training hub, symbolic and functional. Jenna laughed. Turn the place that never promoted me into the headquarters for helping women rise? Exactly. I'm in. They clinked mugs. As the sky deepened into indigo, Jenna looked around her life. She had no husband, no fancy family name, no one propping her up. And yet, she had everything: peace, power, purpose. She remembered something Haley once said, full of venom, you'll always be alone. But Haley had been wrong, because Jenna wasn't alone. She was free, and that was better. Reflection, lesson learned. Being labeled the strong one can sometimes be a curse disguised as praise. In families and systems where favoritism thrives, the quiet, dependable person is often expected to carry the weight without complaint until they break. Jenna's story reminds us that silence is not the same as weakness, that loyalty without reciprocity is not noble, it's toxic. You can't make people love you by shrinking, and you don't owe anyone your energy simply because they share your DNA. True strength is not in enduring endless disrespect, it's in walking away from it, even if you have to rebuild alone. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so fully that those who overlooked you have no choice but to see who you've become.